This conference will now be recorded.
Tom, can you hear us? Anyone?
I can hear you.
Thank you very much. All right. Sorry for the delay there. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm going to go around. We have some new folks in the room, so I'm going to go around and have us do introductions. I'm going to start with Michaela over here. If you want to introduce yourself and just round tables.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm Michaela. I'm the transportation planner with the NPO.
This one? Hi, Jerome Ralter, transportation planner at NPO.
Jonathan Stockberg, transportation planner with the NPO.
Tanya Martinez, mobility director with the NPO. Welcome. Thank you.
Dana Hornholt, capital projects manager with Fort Collins.
Dina Kutosh from CDOT planning with Josie. Krista Gahan, multimodal planning branch.
Josie Thomas, CDOT Region 4 Planning and Stakeholder Relations Manager.
I'm Evan Pico, the transportation planner with Fort Collins.
I'm going to call on the city engineer for Loveland.
Becky Carrasco, transportation planning director with the NPO.
Victoria Lockhart, Transportation Planner with Street Group. Kim Boyganelli, from the Senior Civil Engineer.
Eric Tracy, Flavor County Engineering.
Anna Rose Cunningham with City of Loveland, transportation planner.
Brian Harding, planning manager for City of Loveland Parks and Rec.
Marilyn Hildenberg, open lands and trails manager for the city of Loveland.
David Cashman, senior parks planner, City of Loveland.
Shane Porter, planning director, Town of Starbucks.
Great, thank you so much. If anyone online wants to introduce themselves, you're welcome to. If you stay muted, that's fine too. But all right. We'll move into public comment. Do we have any public comment online or in the room? Seeing any hands online. We'll go ahead and move to the approval of the March 19th meeting minutes. Do we have any comments on the meeting minutes? Changes? No. Can I get a motion to adopt?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, we'll adopt the meeting minutes. And we'll move now into the Regional Air Quality Council update, and I see Tom is ready to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Do I have the ability to share my presentation or?
Yes.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
I
we're
heard the
working on
answer.
it.
Yes.
Just a moment.
There you go. You should now.
Okay, so. All right, great. Can somebody confirm they can see the title slide okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, as I usually do every month, I'm just trying to keep folks updated on the air quality planning efforts for the ozone standard that are to be completed over the next 6 to 9 months. We've had some changes. So first, I'm just going to briefly review a focus area. I talked to you all a few months ago about the idea of indirect sources or facilities that generate and attract, trips by cars and trucks. So I've got a little more information on that, and then I want to talk about changes to our planning horizon. So just real quickly, just to remind folks what indirect sources are, they're facilities or installations that cause a lot of trips. You build something big and people come and go, and the fact that they're the group that's trying to operate that facility generates trips. So examples that we're looking at in particular are in the lower left: warehouses, entertainment and recreation venues, airports, particularly DIA, and universities. Historically, in other parts of the country, EPA and states have looked at industrial or commercial developments, residential construction sites, intermodal freight facilities. So there's a wide variety of these things that cause the trips. On the kind of freight side of things, we all live in the world of things. So there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't ever see that's moving around. So we have air freight, and we have obviously warehouse type handling for bringing in and then distributing. And then we have this intermodal stuff where trains and trucks work together. We don't have any ports here in Colorado, so we don't have that one circled. We've been working a little bit to try and kind of clarify what we mean when we talk about indirect sources or these kind of facilities. So this is sort of a compare and contrast. We've got the traditional way that air pollution's been controlled. You set emission limits on individual smokestacks or on individual cars and trucks that are then tested. Those are well established and successful. Those are rules and regulations, but they don't really address the growth in the number of those individual sources. It's kind of a source by source snapshot. So these indirect source programs are not designed to tackle the individual trip emissions, but the collective emissions from all the VMT. So in the North Front Range, we have a lot of growth of population. There's more driving, and we expect emissions from collectively to increase. So we're interested in programs, plans, and maybe regulations to reduce emissions from the construction and operation of these facilities. Okay, I can operate this. So just real quickly, kind of the timeline and types of source categories that have been regulated by some examples. The South Coast for warehouses, and they're looking at freight yards now. San Joaquin Valley for about 20 years has had a program to limit emissions from the new development projects. So they're not going to existing projects. They're looking at new developments. And Oregon and Washington have long-term programs to have permits to construct projects so that all the planning is done in advance. And these are in PM 2.5 or ozone non-attainment areas. They typically define what's regulated and set thresholds. And there's additional consideration of these programs in California, New York, and New Jersey. So we've drafted some statements for the work groups to engage on. You see those listed, the subgroups listed at the bottom. We have board members who are, for the RAC board, who are convening those groups. And so they're listed out there. We greatly appreciate the effort of those individuals away from their day jobs to convene these work groups. We've had a lot of discussions. We continue to meet with those groups to develop approaches for each of the types of subgroup sources. We developed a set of recommendation options in March and discussed that at the last work group meeting the last Tuesday of the month. We've have received a lot of feedback. There's been a lot of good discussion. We're going to update those before the April meeting. It occurs the fourth Tuesday of every month. Anybody can access this shared Google Drive where you can look at what the groups are recommending for these different types, and leave comments and suggestions. We try to make this as transparent and open as we can. So we're kind of approaching how to deal with emissions from these facilities and their trips that they generate or cause. So one thing we all like to do in the air pollution control business is make sure that we're using the best available data. So one place to start would be to have a regulation that implements some reporting requirements where those data would be reported to the Air Pollution Control Division, and the RAC could help with that. But we also want to make sure we offer approaches to reduce the emissions. And so we're thinking about facility-based best management plans, or BMPs, where a facility could pick from a list of strategies to reduce those emissions. So we have here's our time frame at the bottom. We're going to bring the policy recommendations to the RAC board at their first Friday of October meeting. So we have about 5 months to work on this, to get those recommendations put together. And then coming out of that meeting, then whatever the board endorses would be presented to the Air Quality Control Commission at their November meeting as part of a larger strategy blueprint plan. I've talked to you folks about some of the other strategies we're looking at. So the this would be one among many strategies that would be in the blueprint. So, for those of you that work in, analysis and engineering, you have to kind of break it down into the pieces. These are the next steps that we're going to do. We're going to start defining things more specifically. What are the emission reductions we could get from those strategy menus that I talked about? What are the types of vehicles, trips, and equipment that we can account for? Consider the kind of the elements of strategies or choices that a facility might make over what time frame. And then again, try and make use of available public record data. Some of those are in the blue box to the right. These are highly reliable data sources, so we'll be drawing upon these locally estimated numbers. And then we're using our contractor Ramble to help us develop some of this technical information. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we have a wide variety of stakeholders involved in this process. There's long lists of governments, environmental groups, warehouse and distribution folks, entertainment, airports, universities, transit and transportation, and then some other more general or other categories. We're seeking feedback from anyone. So if you all have any ideas about groups that we've missed or individuals that we should engage with, you could point them at the sign up page and we will pull them into our meeting process. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears here quickly because there's been kind of a major development with respect to the air quality analysis and planning efforts. And so this is sort of the tip of the iceberg. I don't want to take a long time with you all, but there's been this change where the Air Pollution Control Division sent the RAC board a letter ahead of our April 4th, our regular board meeting. And you can look at the letter, but essentially what the state has decided to do, which is a very pragmatic decision, is because we're not able to model air quality attainment, in other words, be at or below the 70 part per billion standard by 2026. We're also seeing that lack of downward trend in the monitoring data. The state's going to ask EPA for a voluntary reclassification. It'll go from serious, which is what it is now, to a severe non-attainment. And this is a standard process under the Clean Air Act. And the state has not yet done that, but when they do it, that'll start the time clock for EPA to respond to it. So it effectively takes a lot of the immediate planning requirements off the table. We do have to submit some administrative chapters just to keep the foundational stuff in place, and we're going to be doing that. I'll touch on those briefly, but there is some additional analysis work, and I'll just mention some of that now. So we're stretched our horizon out to look out across the next 6 months to develop a control strategy plan and bring those individual chapters that I mentioned that we still need to submit. So we're kind of aimed more at the October, November timeframe, but we're going to be actively engaged in all of our planning work and strategy development over that timeframe. Here's a way to think about it from a map point of view. On the right is the non-attainment area for the 2008 standard. It's the same as the one on the left, except that northern Weld County is not included. That area on the right is already in the severe status under the Clean Air Act. So when the area on the left, for the 2015 standard, is reclassified by EPA, the basic requirements don't change because most of the area is already covered by the severe classification for the 2008 standard. So all of the baseline requirements about permitting, except for that northern Weld County, reformulated gasoline, things like that, those will all be already in place. And so we know the basic.
Could we pause for just a second? Sorry, we're having an echo here in the room. I don't know. Are they just not in sync with each other?
You try this. Maybe try that one. Because I still need.
They are multi-level.
Try speaking again,
All
Tom.
right, Tom, could you say something?
Yeah, nothing worse than me echoing.
That's not what we want.
It is
Is that better?
Take a second here. No, it still has an echo. We're gonna give it a try here.
All right, try again, Tom.
All right, go ahead.
How about now?
Still echoing. We were on the edge of our seats, excited to hear what you had to say, so I had to pause you to delay.
We're gonna get creative.
Just turn one off.
Oh, that's for both of them. Fantastic.
Can you just unplug them?
Yeah, we can go down to one.
Yeah, let's just do one.
We'll go down to one.
And online, if you can't hear us, we'll just
And then we should probably
let us know if you can't hear us.
Center
All right, Tom,
this.
go ahead.
well, wait until we're not in motion. All right, try now.
All right, go ahead.
How about now?
Oh, perfect.
Okay, great. All right, well, the good news is I won't echo. So just a few more slides to kind of cover what is immediately happening now. So just want to leave you all with the idea that while this is an important change for the planning effort and the required analysis, the practical effect on the baseline air quality controls, will not be changing as a result of the state's decision. There are some kind of important initial conclusions that we're reaching. We have the responsibility of leading the planning effort. So I've already made the first point there. Those control measures, really won't change that are already in place, like which sources are permitted and the reformulated gasoline and things like that. But in order to ever reach the air quality standard of the 70 part per billion, we're going to need to do more local emission controls over the next 5 to 6 years. And those really need to, not focus on greenhouse gases or the longer term policy goals of the state. They have to really focus on the ozone precursors, the NOx and VOC emissions, which, for some sectors are really, increasing or at least not going down. And in order to reach the standard and, meet our requirement for state and federal laws, we have to really get those controls in place over the next 3 to 4 years, so 25 to 28, because the emissions have to be reduced so the air quality can improve, because the monitoring is for the 2030 through 32 timeframe that will determine our success in meeting the standard. So we're already saying that the current 3-year monitoring period of 24 to 26 it's not salvageable at this point. It's going to be over the standard. So we need to look ahead and say, how do we meet the next 3-year compliance period of 30 to 32? The good news is we have a lot of existing modeling tools that we've built over the last year and a half, and we'll be able to evaluate the rules on the books that the state already has, and also examine these new control measures. So we'll be making those evaluations and then bringing them along to the board and the commission in the fall. Okay, so we've been cycling through these updates to the required attainment plan, and this is the kind of the timeline of what we've been doing. These are chapters of the state implementation plan that have to be prepared. And normally you'd have to do that whole package that we show for that February through June timeframe. But we're focused right now on this shorter list, and we're really focused for the month of May on these 2 chapters, which are what is the inventory going to be in 2026? Is that tracking downward, what we call reasonable further progress? And then importantly, we work with North Front Range and DRCOG to set motor vehicle emission budgets that for all the on-road vehicles that can't be exceeded. So at the bottom, it notes that there are other chapters, 5, 7, and 10. They're not part of with this decision by the state. They will not be submitted. They're not part of these chapters, which are the administrative plan requirements. And so, things have changed a little bit here, and we have a little bit less ambitious timeline over the next 3 months about the chapters that need to be finished. So that's the Air Pollution Control Division has done the lion's share of the work on that, but this is where we are at this point. So just a couple to remind folks, if you're interested in understanding better what's in these chapters that are going to be presented in early May, we have to have a chapter on the future year inventory, even though we're not going to reach attainment by that year, but we have to be showing progress for volatile organic compounds. And so you demonstrate that attainment by making what's called reasonable further progress, And so we use our projections of 2026. That second sub-bullet is a really kind of convoluted definition, but that's what EPA requires us to analyze. So basically you start from 2017, you take this ongoing averaging out to 2026, and you say, are we reducing the human-made VOC emissions at least 3% per year on average? So that'll be reported in this chapter. It accounts for what we know about how the inventory was put together, talks about the methodology, and then it demonstrates that reasonable further progress. And then finally, this is always important for the Transportation Advisory Committee, I guess, is the motor vehicle emission budgets is a Clean Air Act required program and demonstration, because federal funds for highway and transit activities have to be consistent with the state plans, and the plans must include these motor vehicle emission budgets. So that second sub-bullet, again, has a somewhat complicated definition there, but we have to set limits on the on-road emissions that can occur in the future for the purposes of meeting that reasonable further progress milestone. And we have to do that by analyzing the highway and transit vehicle use and emissions. So we have a lot of help for North Front Range to do that for that region. So we go back, and this chapter covers the history under the standard, the role of the MPOs in that process, and it proposes emission budgets for the entire 9-county non-attainment area, and then the northern or Larimer-Weld northern sub area, and then the southern sub area, which is the 7 counties in the metro area. So I've given you a lot of information, but I like to leave this information in the record so that if folks are interested in any of these topics, you can follow up with me or others at the RAC with questions. And of course, we're always seeking involvement. So thanks for letting me walk you through that.
Questions for Tom? All right, thank you, Tom. And I think Brendan didn't have any updates, but correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan. We'll go ahead and move to the action item. So we're looking for adoption of the FY 2026-2027 UPWP tasks.
So last month, I brought the draft tasks to you for the 26 to 27 UPWP. The Finance Committee reviewed the budget at their March 20th meeting. And since I wrote this memo, their April meeting has been rescheduled to next Thursday. So they will be meeting then to recommend approval for the council of the budget at their May meeting. The UPWP will then, once it's the Finance Committee recommends the budget approval, I'll combine everything and put it out, the entire UPWP out for public comment following that meeting. So it's not out yet, but it will be. So pending no negative public comment, we'll be asking the council to approve it at the May meeting. Should any council approve
that. Any questions for Becky? I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the 2026-2027 UPWP tasks.
So moved. I'll second.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, motion carried. Thank you. Right, next we'll move to the April 2025 off-cycle TIP amendment from Jonathan.
All right, the off-cycle April 2025 TIP amendment includes 3 new projects from various agencies. The first project is the Taft Hill Road Corridor MMOF project. We've talked about MMOF projects enough, but just know that we're putting this one to the TIP. The next project is from Greeley with the Greeley Neighborhood Safety Program. This project adds $500,000 of federal exploratory advanced research funding, also known as EAR, and then $103,938 of local EAR funding. That project has improvements throughout Greeley, consisting of crosswalk markings, stop bars, speed bumps, raised crosswalks. You get the idea. The last project is also from Greeley with the Greeley Evans Transit US 34 bus expansion 8020. This project has $3,508,404 of FTA 5339 funding, and then $877 and $101 in local funding. This project adds 5 new buses for expanded service along US 34. I will say the same thing I said last time with that for federal funding and now also MMOF funding, that it sounds like we should just be putting these projects into the TIP to show at least what is planned. And yeah, there's no real updates there. The 30-day public comment period started on April 14th and will close on May 13th. NFRMPO staff noted no disadvantages and support adding the off-cycle April TIP amendment to the 2024 to 2027 TIP.
Any questions for Jonathan? I'll entertain a motion to approve the April 2025 off-cycle TIP amendment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Eric.
Oh, thank you.
All right. We're going to move to our presentation portion. We have Marissa here to present about the 2050 Statewide Plan. You're all.
Yeah, we're sharing.
Cool. Thanks for having me here today. Lots going on at the state level with planning right now. So we can talk about sort of high level how CDOT plans and why we plan and how most importantly we work with all the NPOs and TPRs around the state collectively and use that your great work in planning to roll up into our statewide plan. I'm going to go to the next page or slide. So yeah, I'll be giving just some of this, many of you might already know, but I'll give an overview of multimodal planning at CDOT, talk a little bit about our public engagement. Got some exciting telephone town halls and surveys coming up. Talk a little bit about our vision for our next 10-year plan, which is our project-based plan that implements the vision for our long-range 2050 plan. How we coordinate, of course, with the NPOs, and then answer any questions. So my goal really here is just to give you a high-level overview of how we plan at CDOT, again, how we work with our planning partners, and then an overview of our key planning documents, such as the 10-year plan. So, the mission, I work in our Division of Transportation Development at headquarters at CDOT, and that third bullet really is our mission, is we're dedicated to preparing Colorado's transportation for the future through planning, analysis, and innovation. So, The planning process really begins with you guys at the local level. It includes hearing what your ideas are and building strong relationships in every corner and region of the state. So we have 15 transportation planning regions in Colorado. 5 of those transportation planning regions are, of course, the NPOs, including North Front Range. And then we also have 2 tribal nations, Southern Ute, Mountain Ute down in southwest Colorado. We work with all of those transportation planning regions and tribal nations. We work with you to identify issues, look at data trends, patterns, share ideas. And then as a state, you all have members that serve on our statewide transportation advisory committee. That's a great group that informs the Transportation Commission and looks at the needs of our transportation system in Colorado. The next slide. So the statewide transportation plan and our transit plan, we update those plans so every 4 to 5 years. They look out 20 plus years, so we're updating out to 2050 now. And again, those sort of mother plans are built from the aggregated themes of all the regional plans, both the transportation and transit plans. We try to look, the name of my branch is the multimodal planning branch, so we look at all modes of transportation to inform the statewide plan. So sort of newer to our planning process, or we implemented this back in 2019, is our 10-year plan that takes sort of that visionary, the goals and priorities from our long-range plans, and then puts actually strategic projects to that vision that we can implement over what we anticipate over the next decade to achieve that vision that we set for ourselves. So that's an exciting new addition. I think a lot of you are familiar with it. I think it's we have so many website hits now that we never had before, so I feel excited as a planner that people are looking at the 10-year plan and those strategic projects that we have in place. And then, of course, as projects get funded, they go into what we call our FOIDER Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. Your TIP rolls into our Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. Again, that's a 4-year plan that shows projects that are funded. So we also work really hard to have our statewide plan be a very integrated plan. So some key statewide modal and topical plans that inform our statewide plan are our strategic highway safety plan. That's in the process of being updated now. So we were able to use a lot of the data and outreach that they conducted specific to that plan and also use it for the statewide plan. Our Division of Transit and Rail is conducting a transit connection study that's helping to inform our statewide plan. My team is developing an active transportation plan that will be an appendix to the statewide plan. We hadn't updated our bike head plan since 2012, so it was time for an update. So we, again, used a lot of the data and outreach for this, making it more broad as an active transportation plan to inform this plan. We have a great freight branch, also in the Division of Transportation Development. They produce the Colorado Freight Plan. That's a key, also a key appendix to the statewide plan. And then, of course, our Transportation Asset Management Plan. You know, we have a lot of fix our roads and asset management needs around the state. So I would say, while this bullet is listed last, it really is going to be a huge theme in the statewide plan. So we also are very performance-based with our planning. We start off the planning process by working with our Transportation Commission to develop goals and targets so that we can define what success looks like for the statewide plan. So when we started this off, our Transportation Commission looked at updating what we call our Policy Directive 14, which tells us what our goals and objectives should be and how we're going to measure them. And I think if you go to the next slide, this is what we arrived at a high level that we, our guiding PD14 principles for what we need to achieve in this next statewide plan. And the 3 areas are advancing transportation safety, again, fixing our roads, really want to double down on our focus on prioritizing strategic investments to improve our infrastructure conditions. We hear so much, I'm sure you do too, about potholes and just how terrible our roads are sometimes. So we really want to send a strong and clear message about our plan to fix our roads. And then 3rd is sustainably increasing transportation choice. This connects to our greenhouse gas planning standard that we have in Colorado, and then ensures that people have options to get where they need to go, other than driving. I talked a little bit about public engagement. We do a variety of things to try to engage with the public. We also look at, NPOs do your own engagement for your plans, so you guys will, kind of on leads for engagement in your areas. But outside of NPO areas, we also do a variety of community events. We tag on stakeholder meetings. We'll soon be launching a statewide public survey, and a telephone town hall, so I'll talk about those now since those are coming. And then of course, at Region 4 has county meetings. Those all go into informing statewide plan. And so the next slide, I'll talk about the telephone town halls that we're frantically trying to stand up. So we did some telephone town halls, actually, I think the last 3 different planning cycles. We did the last series about 5 years ago. But they are a great way we can actually call cell phones this time, which is exciting. So, or not exciting if you're having dinner, and I don't know. But we'll be calling people, and you can also register to get a phone call as well. But this is a great way where people can talk directly to their transportation commissioners, ask questions, get answers. It's kind of like a radio talk show. Heather Paddock will be on for the Region 4. So actually the Larimer, Well, and Morgan telephone town hall was just set. We'll be putting more information on our website, sending out some press releases. But that will be May 6th from 6:30 to 7:30 at night. So we're excited to do that one. And we'll definitely probably reach out to you, Becky, to help us sort of promote this and see if we can get some information. So I'm going to come there. The next slide. Sort of a companion to these telephone town halls, we'll also be launching our statewide transportation survey. It's a very, I think, the environment right now, people aren't very keen on taking long surveys, but we try to keep this one pretty short and to the point, centered around our goals of advancing transportation safety, fixing our roads, and again, sustainably increasing transportation choice. So that will go live soon. Also would love your help promoting that survey and promoting the telephone town halls. And then a shift a little bit from going from our long-range plan to talking about our vision for that next 10-year plan, which is our strategic, we also kind of call this our strategic pipeline of projects. So when we first stood up our 10-year plan, it was back in 2019, and so we're now well over halfway in delivering our original 10-year plan. We made a lot of good accomplishments, which we'll have some future slides on or later slides on. But it's time now that we update our 10-year plan so that we're working with the complete 10-year horizon again. So as we do that, and we're working very closely with Region 4 to do that, our desired outcomes are really just, again, fix our roads. How can we make transportation safer? How can we, at the same time, provide transportation choice? And then, while not a PD14, one of our goals is to be very accountable and transparent with how we plan and the decisions that we're making, recognizing that our funding is limited. I think I've talked about this enough, but just a little bit more about how we want to go about achieving our priority goals. Maybe on the next slide. So one of the tools that we're using to inform both public and stakeholder outreach is what we're calling our 2050 long-range transportation planning visualizer tool. So I know like the rural TPRs, looking at Evan, that's upper front range, I think. But this is a tool that I wish we would have had last planning process, where we brought out like hundreds of maps to meetings, and people were all like trying to like look at different trends, and it wasted a lot of paper, I'm sure. But this is a great tool. I think NPOs have tools similar to this, so you might have one. But we've never had one quite like this at a state level. That really is a place where you can turn layers on and off, see data trends related to roadway condition, roadway usage, transportation safety, transit routes, and also our current 10-year plan projects. So I really think this is one of the coolest and best things that have come out of this planning process. So I hope you guys look at it.
Does that have traffic count data in there?
It does. You can revisit it with your graduation.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
So, yeah, if you have any questions, let me help, let me know. We got it together, but. So actually some examples on the next slide. This 2R theme of fixing our roads shows all the 4 state highways in our state. Have quite a lot of them. The next slide shows similar data, but is drivability life. Red is sort of the roads that are in that low drivability life. Yellow is moderate. Green is high. This is just a statewide glimpse. You can zoom in and out on the map, look at just your areas. But this is, kind of why I emphasize we're looking really, really heavily at fixer roads for this next statewide plan. So I want to set the stage now for the new 10-year plan update. So again, it was about 5-6 years ago that we embarked on developing our first ever 10-year plan. So the reason that we stood up a 10-year plan originally was just so that we had a shorter term sort of action plan, so to speak, that considers, again, the goals, focus areas, and priorities of the long-range plan, and then identify strategic projects that would best support that collective vision over the next decade. And at the time, we had really helpful funding from Senate Bill 267. So that Senate Bill 267 funding, which was only for a 4-year period, but that funded the bulk of the projects for the first 4-year prioritized planning period. So that's that first red box. I know this is probably pretty small, but that funded our first 4 years of the 10-year plan, 2019 to 2022 projects. And then we revised the plan now in that 2022 time period to adhere to the greenhouse gas planning standard, which took effect at that time. And then we prioritized projects based on updated revenue forecasts and streams for 23 through 26. So that kind of takes us where we are today, and now the need to develop a new 10-year plan that will cover fiscal years 2027 to 2036. So we'll again be prioritizing projects in 4-year increments, just because I wish we had a crystal ball and knew exactly what funding would look like out 10 years. We just have a better handle in 4-year periods. We have we have a vision of projects we want to see and want to demonstrate, but we prioritize projects based on what we think we'll have in 4-year segments. And I think so those projects that are currently in the out years sort of will be the basis for how we build out the projects for the next 10-year plan. Region 4 will be working with North Front Range, all of the Upper Front Range and Eastern to look at those projects currently in the 10-year plan and update project costs and scopes, and then hear from you make sure these are still the priorities and make sure that they align with their priorities as a state. We're hoping to adopt the next 10-year plan by the end of this year, December 2020.
Real quick, do we hit on funding in this slideshow?
No.
Okay, I just want to paint a little bit of a picture of what we're seeing for upcoming funding and what we have to work with. So when the plan was created, the first 4 years, 2019 through 22, it was built around a $500 million a year assumption statewide. Region 4 gets 23.87% of that through a distribution formula. There's 5 regions throughout the state, so that's our cut. And so we had a lot of money, right? We had a lot of money for our strategic projects. We got to put projects in the out years that, you know, we could work towards. Fast forward to 2023 through 2026, funding went down. It went down to $350 million a year statewide. Again, we get 23.87% of that. Where we're at today, even less. Not to put a negative cap on the conversation, I'm just trying to set expectations of what we're working with here. And difficult discussions will need to be made, but we're only going to get statewide about $225 million a year. So we already had difficult discussions originally because Region 4, we have 13 counties, we have 4 planning regions, Northern Range is one of those, of course. Conversations are going to be even more difficult. Northern Range has been very unified in the previous updates that I-25 was the priority. Now that those are done, we get to start the fun conversations with Northern Range on what that looks like moving forward. We are very invested in fixing our roads. There's no shortage of that around here. But we will look heavily to your tiered list of projects and your plan, as well as all of our internal sources on what the priorities will be. So we will be keeping you up to date. We have a TPR chair, staff rep, and transportation commissioners meeting tomorrow, actually. Becky and Paul Sizemore will be there, which is great. So it's kind of our first stop to kick off that Region 4 process. But we do expect to come to council in May to kind of give a briefing of what I just did, but in more detail as far as what the 10-year plan is, the funding assumptions there. And June, we will bring a draft list of projects to council as far as what our recommendations will be to headquarters on that 10-year plan allocation list. Highly encourage you all to listen.
Let's go on. Yeah, before I guess the focus, all of our focus will probably be shifted very soon to talk about the new 10-year plan, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate all that we've accomplished in our current 10-year plan and all that we've funded in fiscal years 19 through 26. So this, you know, while we don't have quite the funding that we did when we stood up with the plan with Senate Bill 267, we have delivered about $4 billion in that fiscal year 19 to 26 period, with almost 80 projects in the plan complete and another 45 under construction statewide. So we've done a lot. And I think it's human nature, I guess, to focus on where you are at the present, but I think one of my goals in this new statewide plan is not to let us forget, though, of what all we've done. Because if we can demonstrate all that we've done when we've had money, I think there's a better opportunity to get maybe more funding in the future. So that is one of my personal goals for this plan, is to be very accountable and transparent. We have really cool tools though now to show how we're being really responsible and effective with the dollars, and the dollars that we have. We have an accountability dashboard. There's a link in this presentation. It shows you, you can go to each region of the state and see all the projects, where they are in the 10-year plan, how they're funded. We update these quarterly, so projects, when we put them in the out years, we always keep track of like the actual to the penny almost dollar amounts and the sources of funding that goes into these projects. So there's a lot of great information here to show you exactly how we're funding these projects. There's also an accomplishments report that we put out, and links to project websites where possible, and we're also working to update some project fact sheets. So you can click on projects in the 10-year plan and know what they are and what they do for you.
I noticed a bullet point there involving PM Web, and I heard a sort of movement that CDOT may be looking to help local agencies become involved with PM Web for local agency projects. I was wondering if that was part of this effort or a future effort.
I would assume it's a separate effort. We have a whole PRTO, which is Project Reporting and Transparency Office. We have a whole division, and they're the ones who kind of spearhead all the PM Web stuff. So I can reach out to them and see if we can get some more info on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is probably really small, but you can see these all on the website, but just wanted to show that this table has all the completed projects in CDOT Region 4. The next slide shows those that are under construction. So we have these helpful little tables in the 10-year plan document, and then that dashboard can give you even more information on how these projects have been funded and how they're moving forward. So great information there if you want it. Talked about this a little bit, but we'll be working really closely with NFRMPO, as well as the other NPOs around the state, just to hear, you guys are critical when it comes to telling us, what your priorities are for your region, and we really do listen to that and do our best, knowing that we don't have a ton of money, but how best we can align your regional priorities with our statewide goals. So already talked about telephone town halls and surveys. Would love your help and support getting the word out about that. And then I think Josie already spoke really well about how we're reviewing our current 10-year plan projects in the out years, seeing how we can come up with a strategy to advance those in the next 10-year plan, and then any new projects for consideration for you guys. This is sort of where we're at. We hope to adopt our 2050 plan around the August 2025 timeline, and then build on that and adopt the 10-year plan by the end of this year. So we've already done a lot of work to date with the rural TPRs around the state, kind of hearing from them what their priorities are, and so now is really a great time to be bringing the NPOs back into the fold and hearing what your priorities are, and then using that again to build our 10-year plan. I just added this up. I think you guys are familiar. We're also facing some federal uncertainties, so don't have all the answers or what that's going to mean, but we'll work with you and we'll work with the NPO to communicate if any documents, planning documents, such as the tips to may be experiencing delays, or if we have to take another route in the planning process. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Sure. A lot of information.
Yeah, it was great. That tool that you guys created, I would agree with them. That was great. That'd be awesome. Great. And I think for Loveland, certainly in the trail communities, if there's anything we can re-message out about those town halls, we certainly are happy to share your social media posts and things like that. So, sometimes people are subscribed to the local channels, and we're happy to help share them.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be getting emails from next year. Great.
All right.
Sorry, just a question on that. How will, CDOT's just gonna call numbers, or are they gonna hold that?
We have a list with a vendor who's able to just call cell phones that are random, and they're able to do it by area of the state. Yeah, so we have it loosely drawn around the Transportation Commission districts. But yeah, they're able to just call cell phones, and then there also is a way for people to, if they want to participate, sign up to receive a call.
Yeah, I think there's people along the lines of what Nicole was saying, like we'd love to set expectations for our residents about, receive this number, call me.
Yeah, don't hang
Are you guys sending out like mailers this time with like dollar bills attached?
I wish.
Okay, last time they did that, then we got called about, like, is this a scam?
That's for
Yeah.
household survey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the household survey, yeah.
It seems scammy.
No, it was real.
It's a conspiracy on the social media.
We have no money for that, but just word of mouth.
We got cash in the mail. Lucky resident.
So is the number of, fund members in a particular area, like, is that kind of indicative of the population or the ratio of the population in that area?
Yeah,
If it's, if it's a more rural area, you're gonna call the same ratio.
I think so.
Numbers.
I'll verify that with the vendor. We just got under contract lately. But yeah, that's, I think, how they've worked in the past, is that it's supposed to be a sampling of residents in that area. But I would assume there might be more in the urban areas. Should be still a pretty good sample for that area.
Just one more question about that. Is the goal though to get like a statistically significant like data, or is it more just to?
I don't know if it'd be like quite as statistically valid as something like where you got that money in the mail for that household trip where you asked, there's a lot of questions in there. This is more just sort of people who are willing to stay on the line and offer their thoughts on transportation. Like we'll have some polling questions, where how safe do you feel using the roads in your area? And people will say like, one, they're really safe, or they can tell us that. So I think we have to, I don't know if we can call it statistically valid, but we kind of just use that as sort of input. I mean, we can give the information to like the NPOs and TPRs for what we heard in their area of the state to help inform their planning process. But, so one of the tools that we use just to hear people we might not have heard of before.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it. All right. We'll move on.
Oh, just one, sorry. Someone did a brief introduction. Go ahead.
Yes, we'll do, we're gonna move to the Wilson Avenue multi-use PAC project. We've got our team from the city of Wilton here. Was that
No, it's nothing else, yeah. Yeah, so if you all remember, whenever a project has a scope change, we have either the minor scope change, which just needs to come to the TAC, and you guys give a thumbs up and then it moves on. If it's a major scope change, then it needs to go to council. We spoke with the city of Loveland staff, and my take is this is a minor scope change, so it still needs to come to the TAC and get your thumbs up, but I don't think this rises to the level of major and needs to go to council. So
the definition lists some things, major and not minor.
very, very clear. This has nothing to do with funding, so this is why I'm thinking this is not a major scope change.
Yeah, great, thanks. So once again, I'm David Casper, Senior Parks Planner at the City of Loveland. And Becky kind of beat me to the punch a little bit, but I did want to thank Jonathan and Becky for getting us to this point. We did do a preliminary presentation, pretty much the same thing to them about 3 weeks ago. And then a week before that, we did do a CDOT scoping meeting. And we did mention that we were going to ask for the scope change, so just to bring you up to speed there. Okay. Just real quick, just to give you an overall view of what I want to go through today with you. I want to give you the context of the project, give you the current scope of the grant we're working under, and our proposed scope change, of course. And then after that map, I have a quick table just to show you some comparisons. And then another map, I have lots of maps, I love making maps. So, a funding diagram that will explain those tables a little more. And then why we think we have good support, and why we think this is a good change request, and then just kind of weigh the advantages and disadvantages of this change request. And then ultimately, our vision for this project. And then leave a little time for questions at the end. Okay, so for those of you that aren't familiar with Loveland, this is generally located on the west side of town, kind of northwest. We have the Loveland Golf Course, and Wilson Avenue goes north and south. And at the top of the page is 43rd Street. And the project essentially is all within that inverted L, if you will, the yellow highlighted piece. And it starts at Glen Isle Drive, and will work its way over to intersection of 43rd Street and Wilson, and then south down to 29th Street. But I wanted to point out, it's a little hard to see, but we have a dark solid line there. That's our existing rec trail loop. In about 3 weeks, we should have it 100% complete. Approximately, we have a very small piece that needs to get done, and we're almost there. And it's a little over 20 miles, so it's a great asset for the community. As you can see at Glen Isle Drive and 43rd Street, however, it goes through Emerald Glen neighborhood. It's a little circuitous, and you have to navigate four intersections, so complex with traffic. Then it works its way into that natural area, Emerald Glen, and then it kind of just dumps you out on the middle of Wilson Street, which for the purpose of this presentation, I'll just call it a mid-block crossing, if you will. And then you can see over to the lower left-hand corner, southwest of Loveland is Mahaffey Park. And then out way west, we have a lot of opportunities for natural areas. We're currently staking out and we'll be constructing a new soft trail path from Dakota Ridge along 43rd all the way down to Highway 34. So that's underway. And I do DRT for the department, and we meet weekly. We have tons of new units coming out in this part of our community. So one of them being the Lee Farm subdivision. Hunter's Run is coming online, and then even further north and west is Ponderosa Ridge and more to come. So we are working with those developers to get trail connections to not only our loop, but back out to the Front Range. Next slide. Here's the current scope that we're working under. Once again, we start up at Glen Isle Drive. We proposed making a more direct route out to the intersection of 43rd Street and Wilson on the south side of 43rd Street. And then in that original grant, the current one we're working under, continuing south all the way down to 29th Street. So that green dash line represents where we would go through, and there are existing detached walks, but they're less than 10 feet, so we would go back and enhance those to 10-foot width. We also see the scope included 4 intersections on the east side of Wilson Avenue with flashing beacons. I was trying to ask that today why it's called rectangular. I guess it's just because it's a rectangular sign. Anyway. So one at Glen Isle Drive, and then a private entry drive at the old Woodward property, Tavern Ash Drive, and Glendale. So that was in the original scope. The larger circles indicate where we have current controlled intersections. So along Wilson Avenue there. And then when Lee Farm comes online, 35th Street will be extended to the west. And just want to point out some of the things where we have to negotiate to widen that path. That picture is taken along where Tavern Ash is approximately. Tons of infrastructure there to deal with, mature trees and existing landscape. So next slide, please. So our proposed new scope that we present to you is, once again, I'll start up at Glen Isle Drive. We would still do the connection along the south side of 43rd Street over to Wilson and 43rd Street where we have a controlled access crossing. And instead of going down south on the east side of Wilson, we propose crossing there over to the west side. There are a lot less things to negotiate over there in terms of laying out a 10-foot wide path. Some of it already is 10 feet wide, especially the part that fronts the future Lee Farm development. So we'll work with them. They will be punching in some new access points, but we'll have reviewed those plans and they've done the appropriate design. So as you can see in that picture on the left, that there's hardly anything out there. So in terms of cost, this is a lot easier for us to get it done and more quickly. Along with the green, we would still enhance, so the pink dash line from where our current trail dumps out at that mid-block crossing in Wilson continues south down to approximately 35th Street where there is traffic control, and then cross west over and catch up with the trail as it goes through Hunter's Run. And you can see, I took a photo out there, I happen to have a biker, and you can see, I mean, there's not room for bi-directional use there, especially on bikes. So we were, as part of the scope change would include enhancing this to 10 feet wide. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do with that existing fence and work with the property owner and things like that. So the original scope had about 1.45 miles in length of total new 10-foot wide walk. Our new proposed scope is about 1.35. Slide, please. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, next slide.
Oh, it's fine.
So on the left is original grant scope in table format. So those 3 lines represent the path that I mentioned along 43rd over to Wilson intersection and down south on the east side of down Wilson Avenue. And includes the flashing beacon. So our original grant was a little over $1 million. Thank you. We had a required match of $216,000, and we were to get that accomplished at the time, and based on the cost estimates we had in hand at that time, another $47,000, so about $1.3 million. So moving over to the right, we've been studying this whole project and broke it up into 5 phases. And so the new scope we're proposing entails the 2 green lines and the pink line. So once again, south side of 43rd Street over to the intersection of Wilson and 43rd, and then crossing over to the west side down to 35th Street. And then also improving that section I mentioned at the old Woodward property on the east side of Wilson. So to the right is a little summary of that. So we're not asking for any more change in the grant monies. The local match should stay the same, but we've done some new recent opinion of cost for all 5 phases with our civil engineer, and found that we're going to have to do add almost another $900,000 to that original amount to the overmatch to get those 3 lines done that I've highlighted in the bold box there. On top of that, the City of Loveland would pay for the design of all 5 phases. And we have secured, since I made the slide, we have some preliminary costs from our designing engineer. And it's around $280,000, so we're going to pay for that. And then we'll have the whole design and hopefully CDOT approval for all 5 phases. So that would include not only the green and the pink, but the blue and the orange and the purple, which I'll point out in a little bit here. So looking at the big picture and with 5 new opinion of costs, and we add it all up there in that middle table at the bottom, it's about $3.7 million as we see it. Next slide, please. So I talked about the green and the pink. So we are committed to finishing up at some point when we find more funding, the blue dash line, which would then connect that trail that goes through Emerald Glen Natural Area back north, back up to the safe crossing at 43rd and Wilson. We would also continue on both sides of Wilson Avenue from about 35th down to 29th to help capture some of those residents in the older neighborhoods, help them get over to Manhattan Park, and I think it's Loveland Classical Schools there too. So just want to show that real quick. Next slide, please. So we feel like in support of this, that at the end of the design, we'll have an approved CDOT package. I'm working with them for all 5 phases. This is a direct, safe, more direct crossing for those commuters. You don't have to go through the circuitous route through Emerald Glen, making those crossings. So we're reducing some of those intersection crossings with the trail by 4. And then this just gives us some time and flexibility to work out some of those complexities that we found on the east side of Wilson in the older neighborhoods. And I guess we're leveraging our grant a little more, or you could be looking at it that way, because the city's doing, offering more money for the overmatch. So, and then once again, it's going to take a little more thought with the infrastructure on that east side. Skinny trails, sometimes there's 12 to 30 inch retaining walls and privacy fences and all that. So that's kind of our reasoning for the request. Next slide. So once again, this scope will still get us a 10-foot wide path on both the east and west sides. At least in the short term, it'll be up on the north side. But I don't know if you've used that trail where as you enter through Emerald Glen Natural Area and get dumped on Wilson, I'm always tempted to cross there, and I think it's unsafe. And I don't know if you guys have ever witnessed that or felt that. So that will help that. We provide a safe crossing to the south down to 35th Street. It takes advantage of the existing crossings, controlled crossings that we have on Wilson. In the short term, the first, the one at Wilson at 43rd, and then at 35th, and then ultimately down at 29th Street. And I talked about users may be less likely to do that mid-block crossing that I spoke about. Less interruptions in Glen Isle, so those commuters that want a more direct route or want to get up to our new natural area offerings that are coming online soon, don't have to go through the neighborhood. And then we still anticipate having a full build out, utilizes more of the city's money, city of Leavenworth's money. That gives us a little flexibility in those last 3 phases to see how we want to approach those in terms of construction and timing. Then maybe it gives us a little time to utilize some other funding sources that might present themselves. Disadvantages are obviously we don't have the full length of 29th Street at 10-foot width. And the construction could be at different times. Not all 5 phases are going to go in at once. And it's kind of a small disadvantage, but this new scope change is a 10th of a mile less of wide enhanced multi-use map. So I think that's it. Oh, just shows really quick. I don't need to spend much time on it. Just ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all built what it looks like. So 10-foot wide path on 43rd, once again over to Wilson on 43rd intersection. And then 10-foot wide path on both sides of Wilson.
Thank you so much. This is a discussion item. I think we're looking for general consensus or not consensus, whatever your heart may do, but I think we can, yeah, if anyone has any comments.
Quick question, where the RRFBs were in the original and are not in the final, are there plans to maybe have infrastructure put in that you could put those in a later date if you see the need for them?
I think I've reached out to some of our transportation engineers, and really it didn't make a whole lot of sense to have them in the first place. When the whole grant came together, we were a little pressed for time and have them in there, but if you think about the speed of traffic on Wilson, making a right-hand turn or left-hand turn, and then they have to make an abrupt stop, it doesn't make sense. So we'll make sure they're safe crossings, but probably not beacons.
What is the speed limit on Wilson?
40, 35.
Yeah, signed at 40. Actuals are.
Oh, yeah. Much.
Yeah.
But if I can add one other thing in there too, one of the main motivators for this project is we have had some pedestrian deaths in this area. And so this gets us out of those connections through a tight subdivision, takes people off of a 4-foot wide sidewalk up against the fence over to the other side of the street to that much wider 10-foot wide, takes them to those signalized crossings, really gets them out of that flow of traffic out there. So I think this will be a big advantage in the long run.
Are we good with the minor? Okay, see, thumbs up. All right, we're good to go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. And we will move on next to the Regional Active Transportation Corridor update. There's right on time. Thank you all.
All right, everybody, good afternoon. So I'm here today to discuss the regional active transportation corridors and provide an update where we are with the visioning process and to show the proposed changes that we have to the network. And spoiler alert, we do have some changes. So next slide, please. So just as a little bit of a reminder what these corridors are, the RTCs are a network of low-stress active transportation facilities between communities. It is a mix of on-street and off-street facilities. It is mostly off-street, but we do have some portions and some corridors that are either combined or completely on-street. And the goal of these corridors is meant to serve as a spine for bike travel within the region. We do not anticipate this to be holistic. We do anticipate that local communities will build off of this network. This really meant to be the backbone and to help spur additional development as these trails come in. They are intended to be used for all types of active transportation trips. We do not differentiate between recreational trip and commuting trips. We do think that both are important to the region and necessary. So we consider both when considering where these corridors go. And we anticipate them to be fully built out by 2045 with a slight asterisk. We are recommending adding a new corridor, and all these other corridors have been on the list since they were first adopted in 2013. So they've had more of a chance to develop. So with the new corridor, we're not sure if it could be done by 2045, since it will be going online, assuming it is approved by TAC and Council. It will be going online much, much later than the other corridors. So TBD on that. That will depend on construction schedules and how quickly the new corridor can be developed. And on the right is our current RATC network. Next slide, please. So this is our proposed RATC network. And I'll go into more detail about the major changes that we have done in this process. But the biggest changes are the expansion of one corridor to go north to the northern NPO border, and then the addition of a new corridor. We've also made some slight changes to the alignments throughout the region. And that was based on conversations that I had with local communities about their needs, their plans for construction, and to check alignments and make sure that we don't need to make any edits due to unanticipated projects or changes between this update and the last update in 2021. Next slide, please. So, and I do realize this is a lot, so I do have this split out. So what this map is showing is the corridors with our projected job and household growth. So the red are jobs and the blue are households. The lighter colors are 2019 jobs and households, and the darker colors are the projected jobs and households out to 2050. And this is pulled from our 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. So I wanted to just show this to kind of give a visual on where these trails are compared to where the people and jobs are. So this slide, I split it out by job and by household. So on the right is jobs, and then on the left are households. This was not included in the handouts I completed this morning, but I can update this and send this out so you all can take a closer look, because I recognize that is a lot of dots, a lot of colors, and it's far away. I also do have these maps for the new corridors so we can see where they are and what populations they go through. Next slide, please. So the first major change is with RATC number 8. This is currently named to BNSF Fort Collins to Berthoud. So its current northern terminus is at the Poudre River Trail. And with discussion with the city of Fort Collins, we had a discussion on whether or not we wanted to extend this corridor. Where this discussions began was looking at the alternate alignment for RATC number 7, which at around I-25 does diverge. So the proposed alignment does go east under I-25 and continues north on the east side, and the alternate continues on the west side. That is a part of Fort Collins that will be seeing a lot of growth in the future with many additional households, and city staff at the time we were discussing felt that it would be beneficial to have both alignments. So the way we were able to work around that was to extend RATC 8 up north. So what we did is I met with City of Fort Collins, Larimer County, and the town of Wellington to discuss whether or not this is feasible, is it necessary, and to get their thoughts. And as a result of that meeting, we came up with this alignment. So a good chunk of the alignment is just the alternate alignment for RATC 7, and then the portion that goes from the Poudre River Trail east to the north-south section is already outlined in City of Fort Collins plans and will be part of their strategic trails master plan, which has not yet been adopted but should be adopted here shortly. The town of Wellington did note that they were looking for additional bike ped connections to the region, and we do have support from the town of Wellington. And after that meeting, the town of Wellington and Larimer County met to continue the alignment north of the MPO border into Wellington. Next slide, please. So again, this shows the households and jobs, and what we do see in this new section, we see a lot of dark blue. And to note, each dot represents 50 jobs and 50 households. So we do see there is going to be significant growth along this corridor between now and 2050. And you can kind of see that little blue dot just north of that, that is Wellington. So we're also anticipating some significant growth in the town of Wellington as well, along that same corridor. Next slide, please. Oh, so before I move on, are there any questions or comments on RATC number 8 in that extension? All right, hearing none, this is a new corridor that I have temporarily named very creatively Johnstown to Windsor. Assuming this is approved and is included in our RTC network, we will reconsider other names depending on if we can come up with something else. But that is its temporary name for now. So this corridor is along Will County Road 17. The proposed southern terminus is RTC number 2, which is the Little Thompson River Trail. And the proposed northern terminus is Will County Road 76 in Windsor. That was determined through City of Windsor, Town of Windsor staff. Some other suggestions we had for northern termini included the Poudre River Trail and RTC number 5 in Windsor. And along this corridor, it does impact 5 RTCs, and it is from south to north. That's why they're not in order. So starting from the south, it impacts the Little Thompson River Trail, because that is its terminus. It also impacts Big Thompson River Trail, US 34 parallel, the Great Western Trail, the Poudre River Trail, and then the North Loveland and Windsor corridor. Next slide, please.
Before you move off that, that really impacts Severance as well, and I don't think we've had any conversation with you. So the town of Severance has at least 2 miles of that on the northern end, so it might be worthy of future discussions with us too.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah, we can have the discussions, and we can also look at that northern terminus and ending it a little bit further south. That was a recommendation that we got from the town.
How about further north in Columbus?
We can do that too with towns. We can have a conversation.
Okay.
So TBD, we might have an extension of this corridor. Next
Yeah,
slide.
to that, I think at Highway 14, for example,
Yeah.
probably a good one.
Yeah,
I think Windsor was kind of just thinking, hey, let's go up to here, but things are.
I mean, we've got annexed property south of Harmony Road, north of Harmony Road, right there, terminus, it's all town of Severance.
Okay. Yeah, we can have a conversation and see if it makes sense to extend it up to even Highway 14. I looked at that, but
Farmland now, but.
yeah, but how long would it be farmland?
Yeah.
We do not know.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So the reason why this corridor is selected was because it was outlined in the 3 community plans that I knew of that impact. So in the town of Johnstown's 2008 Transportation Master Plan, it does note that they are planning on 10-inch sidewalk and bike paths along every arterial. That also includes Will County Road 17. It is also listed as a neighborhood trail in that plan. In the City of Greeley's 2025 Trails Master Plan, it is recommended as an off-street trail corridor. And then in the town of Windsor's 2020 Transportation Master Plan, it is recommended for a mix of multi-use trail and/or bike lanes throughout the corridor in Windsor. The town of Windsor also already made some active transportation improvements along, it is 7th Street in Windsor along that corridor already. And then, so these 2 pictures are from those plans to kind of show where I pulled that from. Before we move on, are there any additional comments on RATC number 13?
Is there a map that we could go back to that shows the proximity to the other north-south RATCs on the west side?
Yes. Can we? Let's do this one. So on the west side, it is a little close to RATC number 9, which is Johnstown to Timnath. We did consider that, and it does look like it does impact different parts of those corridors. So RETC 9 is following county line, so it does impact the same communities, but it is more the west side, versus this corridor goes through more of the downtown area. So it goes through downtown Johnstown and Windsor, and then the west side of Greeley. If we go to this map here, we can see there's a lot of projected growth in West Greeley, going up to Old County Road 17 on the east side of the corridor. And then we also see some additional growth around Johnstown at the southern terminus, and then in Windsor, particularly on the west side of the corridor. So we are anticipating to see a lot of growth along this section. That does track with our thoughts of having, not thoughts, of our projections that most of the growth in our region will be in the central part near the intersection of I-25 and US 34. So this does track with that. And we can see following along county line, it does impact similar populations based off this map, but we also see that there's some growth on the east side that would be a little bit further from RETC number 9. So due to that, while it is a little duplicitous, we do feel it's still necessary to elevate it to a regional corridor due to that and the fact that it goes through more of the downtown areas as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of explanation of where we came in at. And to speak to the items surrounding Severance, I think initially it was just our goal to connect downtown Johnstown to at least the Poudre River Trail and going on that corridor of County Road 17. And obviously we're seeing some growth on all the communities in that area. So I think it affects, like Jerome said, a totally different group as the County Road 13 alignment, and just helps to bring those three communities really together on a corridor. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I know that we initially met with Severance staff, I think it's the person that's in the room, about a different corridor that we decided not to move forward on. We didn't know that this was going to go so far north at the time, so I apologize we didn't have those conversations. But yeah, I just want to echo what I believe it was Evan said. It's hard to tell who's in the room.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. That is, yeah. So, are there any other comments on RETC 13 or any? So what I'm looking for out of this conversation is kind of thumbs up on if TAC is comfortable with adding this corridor as well as the extension of RETC number 8.
I think the duplicity in active transportation networks is good and needed, so I think it's good.
I agree. The spacing to me looks similar to what we've seen in other areas where there's already been growth. So
yeah, trying to get ahead of some of that growth. And yeah, we were kind of looking around the map like, hey, over this way, they are close. And that's kind of,
works.
It works. Yeah. It just makes sense. And active transportation, 2 miles is kind of one way.
Right.
Yeah. And I would just like to add that Severance definitely needs to be on the conversation with 13. We have to be. Because you guys are where you showed at. It's about 3 miles just already on that red that does impact Severance with annex properties already. 3 annex properties, and developers have their way to develop tomorrow. But conversations for annexation clear up around the Highway 14 area. Because we're already at 14 on the north side, but there's conversations with folks on the south side, clear down to where we already are on the east side of 257, right? Where that flag is, it says 257, that's Severance right there. So we're up and down that corridor on 257,
okay.
All over the place. So definitely, was that Hannah who was saying?
Yes.
Yeah, we did talk. I think Jerome, you were on that call too. It was the east-west connection over to Greeley,
Yes.
along the ditch, which definitely, like, having this conversation today, this is more eye-opening and realistic than the other one you talked to us about. This is important, and the town is getting ready to embark on a Parks and Open Space update. So we're a small community that's 12,000 people, households, that will be using this. So it's not like it's a bunch of businesses who might not be on the trails. It's people who will really be on the trails. I would really, really appreciate this. So I
Absolutely.
just want to make sure we're at the table.
Yeah, I'll reach out to afterwards to set time so we can discuss at Living Terminus and see where that makes sense.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I would love to discuss with you, so you all understand why I'm sitting here going, oh, wait a minute, where are we?
Yes, absolutely.
What's happening with severance in that area?
Especially looking at this map, seeing how much growth is going to happen in Severance that we're projecting between now and 2050. I definitely think tying this into Severance would make sense. And if that's the case, this would likely be renamed from Johnstown to Severance. So look, we already have a new name. Very effective. All right, next slide, please. So just a bit of a reminder of the RATC vision process and next steps. So we will be completing a corridor profile for each of our RATCs. In there, we include trail crossing needs, strategic local connections, proposed alignments, as well as alternate alignments, and then corridor narratives and conditions. So we'll be doing this for all the corridors. We've already began with the 11 corridors that have not seen major changes, but then we will dig more deeply into the new corridors once they're approved, assuming they are. So I don't have a slide on next steps, but in terms of next steps, we'll be going to council to get their feedback, and assuming council does get their approval, then I'll reach out to the affected communities to begin discussing strategic local connections for the new section of RATC 8 and all of RATC 13. And we will also be discussing trail crossing needs for a new corridor and begin working on those corridor narratives. And that is all I have.
Questions for Drew? All right. Thank you for that. Right. While we're waiting for the 10-year priority list scoring section.
So, a couple of things. So in the packet itself, I sent out the world's largest scoring matrix, and you know it's really tiny. It's a very giant spreadsheet. So this was based off of the discussion we had last month of coming up with different scores and weights to go with the various criteria. So the safety, mobility, economic vitality, asset management, strategic nature, regional priority, and project readiness categories from the TC's scoring criteria that they originally developed in 2019 and have added to as we've gone along. So I took sort of what we had for the most recent couple of calls for projects, put that into a very large spreadsheet, and came up with some various different things to say what is, you know, what's a high crash rate versus a low crash rate, the VOC ratios, complete streets items, and then various other things that you can maybe not see but are on this. And then the last one, which was discretionary, since we did talk about this being a popularity contest, votes and all that kind of stuff. So I send all of this out. Between sending out the packet and then sending out the handouts packet, we had a couple of different things happen. So I had a meeting with CDOT Region 4 staff to talk about the upcoming, so tomorrow's meeting for the 4 TPR chair meeting, to talk about Region 4's 10-year list, so which is separate from our priority list, but our priority list feeds into the Region 4 list from an MPO's perspective, along with the other 3 TPRs that are within Region 4. We also received the letter that was mentioned at the council meeting from the US 34 Coalition requesting that the council prioritize US 34, so that's something that the council will talk about at the meeting on May 1st. So these 2 developments have happened since sending out that the original scoring sheet. Then I received a bunch of data, and the reason that it came to you yesterday, so I know this is a lot, but the reason that this came to you yesterday is a couple of different things were coming in from a couple of different communities and from CDOT, and I wanted to just wait and send everything all at once instead of sending you multiple versions of the same thing. So we have here the different data inputs that I received that we did not have last month, as well as the scoring criteria. And so with the additional information that you heard from Marissa and Josie a little bit ago, which was they are looking to have the 10-year plan for the whole state adopted in December. We have to back up and say, what is Region 4's deadline for getting their list into headquarters? And that is July 11th, am I correct?
Yes.
All right, so July 11th. So that means that, as Josie mentioned, Heather will be coming to council in May to talk about what they discussed tomorrow. And then she will be coming back, or Region 4 staff will be coming back in June with the list of projects that are from North Front Range that are going into the Region 4 list at the June meeting. So there's really not a lot of time for us to come up with some sort of ranking, some sort of scoring, something to give and recommend to the council. Now, it could be that when Chair Olson is at the meeting tomorrow, and then Heather's presentation, whatever happens at that discussion, and then they bring it to the main meeting, who knows what that could be? It could be, okay, it's 34, okay, it's whatever fits into the CR Region 4's priorities, it depends. So, but as I've said all along, this priority list is our priority list, but if the purpose is to get projects into 10-year list for Region 4 that then goes to headquarters, I don't know what strategy TAC wants to use. Confusing as mud, but I don't know if anyone has any thoughts, comments. My suggestion would be that we have to do something, and not to not do something, not to do anything. So what would, I don't know if anyone wants to take you. Anyone has an idea?
Yeah, I think just starting kind of where we're at today, and I know we've kind of haven't had a lot of progress on this lately. But I think one thing that we do need to go back, I know that one of the requests was for the project sponsors to give that data, give that level of safety service and some of the crash data and, you know, that stuff. But I think I would like to have there be just a standardized data list, and we see that as provided some of that data that they house and Dee and Katrina really put a lot of work into putting together some information that way. So I'd like to, personally, I'd like to revert back to their data and get that information. That way we're kind of putting all these projects on the same playing field, I guess you'd say.
Which I think Josie gets in that while we're in this meeting.
I was on the
Heather was
original
talking about
request,
this.
and I called you the other day, so we put it together last minute.
Yeah, so, no, that's, yeah, so this is, I don't know, hold up, who's logged in?
They don't have it, I don't think it's to you.
Oh, no, I did not forget to send you.
Who's logged into here?
Yeah.
She is.
Can I forward it on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna forward this on to you, and then we can pull it up, instead of just sitting here talking about this.
And I will say, in terms of strategy, I think we knew this was gonna be a push to get something meaningful, usable, pulled together in time for CDOT's deadline, right? And so our thought was, well, it's worthwhile to give our elected officials some data as they're making decisions, so they have some baseline data points to make decisions from. Doesn't mean they'll read it, doesn't mean that they'll use that, but they'll have it, and that's as a technical advisory committee, I think a good thing for us to provide. So I think that piece is useful, and using the data, you know, whichever set of data we choose to use. I think using data to make our decisions is something that is reasonable for us to provide to the planning commission. I will say it's probably smart for us to go around this table and just sort of say what our top priorities are as the TAC at some point, and just, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is like in these scoring criteria, you know, we always kind of revert back to all the roads are priorities, they're all regional priorities, but the case is really that we have really I-25 and US 34 that are the priorities, that it should be scored at a higher level just based on
The connectivity to the rest of the world.
connectivity. We're talking about, you know, major economic impact with these roads. We need to maintain that level of service and all of that. We understand the priorities of these corridors are. So, I mean, I don't know. I think we need to elevate those two corridors and give them, you know, baseline. It's pretty substantial just based off of that. And I know it kind of goes along with what the scoring was back at the January workshop. You know, US 34 got a lot of points, and then obviously the top scoring one was on I-25, so.
Well, and if we had this tool, we would have good asset data for some of these projects too.
Yeah, next to you.
Like that was a.
That's hard,
Yeah,
I know.
no, that's great, no, that's great.
Now, this is
It's
upgraded,
great,
you
it's great to have.
can't really see it from here, but there's a lot of good information.
Our traffic engineer, Katrina Cloverham, helped see with this, so
Yeah.
this is very good data. That's
She's-
awesome.
Yeah, to me, this standardizes, the data portion of it, then we have to figure out the other things, which is the political,
Yeah.
which corridor matters the most. And I think we still need to give council a little bit of leeway on what their thoughts are as well, so.
I also want to encourage you guys to keep your PD14 hats on. Becky's hit on that, but if you're hoping for 10-year plan funding, which of course I can't tell you yes or no at this point, we're going to be selecting projects that closely align with our PD14 goals. So fixing our roads, advancing transportation safety, and sustainably increasing transportation choice. So think about that, write some narratives for it.
And a lot of that comes back to the safety projects, right?
Mhm.
We need to be elevating those. So if we're seeing on this list that there's a safety issue, we need to be realizing that, so we should be putting more into the safety.
And those goals help us set those metrics, right? We use those goals and sort of prioritize those from there.
And then it's almost done, I completely agree with you with regards to I-25 and 34 needing to be elevated, and that's where priorities lie. But it's almost like when you look at these, and I'm the one who complained probably a year ago about the popularity contest, and there's no scoring criteria, and it was just kind of like, oh, this is my project, I'll vote for this, or yeah, I drive that road, I'll vote for that. But when you really look at the totality of it, it's almost like I wish there could be different categories, so that you have your big, huge roads, and they get this pot of funds. And then the smaller projects or the sidewalk projects that are equally important to the community, but maybe not on a regional scale as 3125, they're going to get the monies. But to be able to at least prioritize, here's money for this kind of group and this group and this group. I know it's not probably something we can do, it's not like we have this huge ton of money, but it would almost be easier to almost score these if they had different types of categories surrounding the level of service or the impact it makes on a local, regional, for our area. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I think, and this, actually, I think the purpose of our 10-year plan needs to kind of have that built into it, right?
Yeah.
Because this,
I don't want to say it's unfair because, but invariably, all the money's going to go to 34 and 25 projects. Not always, but for the most part, yes. The only time it doesn't is, well, we had some monies left over, it was like 600,000, and we decided to fund one project because it would completely fund it. We kind of have the leftovers.
and HSIP funding is, off system typically. There are lots of sources, I think, and this isn't the end all be all for anything. I think we need to sort of orient around our why we're doing this. And I think there's certainly our near-term why is CDOT's process, but I think beyond that, us having a 10-year plan that is data informed, that looks at the whole region and all the problems and not just, I think there are a lot of intersections throughout our region that if we fixed an intersection, we would have to do less to the corridor, right? Like the intersections are where we have most of our problems. And so I would agree that some of this data is just really helpful to highlight where we have problems.
And that is something we could do after this list gets submitted to CDOT. And then, but again, if we submitted all of this, CDOT's probably going to choose 3 or 4 projects, maybe tops, because there's also Eastern, there's Dr. Cog, and there's Upper Frontage, and there's there's not a lot of money. Yeah. So we can do that, and I think we should do that for the next iteration and going forward. And I like the idea of having different types of projects compete against each other, be scored against each other within the different categories. But for this version, I think you have something. Yeah.
Sure.
I think it makes a lot of sense to focus our efforts like in alignment with the goal of trying to get seat off their list, focusing on US 34 and I-25 make a ton of sense for right now. However, that being said, when we do actually do let's coach it in, when we do the priority list, we need to look beyond just seat off roads that are building up in our network. US 34 and I-25 are definitely the most major corridors, but there are other east-west north south roads that are local and not seat out, although if you want to take it back, you can. You gave them money, take it back. That we need to figure out how to make sure we get those actually onto the list, and only having 6 corridors on our list that are only CDOTs does not represent our actual regional needs.
Well, I don't think we had I know I didn't, so I can't speak for anybody else, but I did not have Josie's regional, what is it called, the PF 12?
PD 14?
Thank you. Close. We didn't have that available, or I didn't anyway, when we looked at our scoring mechanisms here. So truthfully, if you're only gonna fund based off that, and we're scoring completely over here, and it has zero relationship to the goals you have over here, then we're kind of missing the boat.
So this list is for us. This is the MPO list. It's based off of our regional significant corridors. This list is wholly independent from CDOT's 10-year list. Two totally different things, but this list does feed into theirs. That's why only 6 priority corridors that are CDOT facilities are on this list. So we can do whatever we want with this, but whether or not it fits with PD 14 is immaterial for being on the list. But getting on their list, yes, but.
So the criteria on here are safety, asset management, some of the things, they align with the criteria.
Okay.
So do we have alignment, at least with the TAC, that I-25 and I-34 need to be elevated to like the top tier?
I can move them.
I can take these 34 projects and then these 2 I-25 projects and move them to the top.
I'm just saying like for, like what we recommend to planning council.
Is there too many 34 projects? Like,
I think that's why the data is helpful to say what are our top priorities. And two, my feedback, I guess, for the meeting that we're gonna have, for taking tax feedback with you, would be with the funding rates we're at, it doesn't make sense to fully fund one project. As locals, we should be contributing and partially funding some of these and then us so we can spread that money further. And so I think some of my feedback would be if we can get partial funding, some of these are get matching funding for federal grants and partner with you on trying to leverage that funding so it can go as far as possible in the region. I think that's the best strategy for the spending. And so, you know, as you get these on, even if we are in a fiscally constrained, but if we can say, hey, our plan is to try to leverage at least half of the funding from local agencies to be able to make these projects go farther, I think that would be a good way to go forward.
How will that impact communities that don't have that kind of?
Oh, welcome, just have to get really crafty, But sometimes development, right?
In all the projects, if that was part of the criteria.
I mean, that's fair. Would you fund 100% for one community, or are there opportunities for communities to have to come to the table to get big projects funded? I guess that's my thought, is and we are that community here, so I'm saying this knowing that we would have a hard time doing that, but any development that comes in should be paying or doing that matching part, right? If we have development coming in and they're causing some of the process, there should be matches there. And I know other communities have, all of us have development going crazy right now, so.
All of our development is annexed to the cities.
A lot of our CIP projects coming up are actually on state highway systems, you know, Highway 14 and Highway 392, and we're trying to come to the table with thought funds and really not asking a whole lot out of CDOT, but maybe some project management stuff or something else. So, but we see it as such a safety thing, and going back to your point about not forgetting about those safety projects or those smaller highways, because I think 392 and Highway 14 in Weld County are crazy dangerous, you know, so a lot of issues there. So we try and help backfill CDOT rather than trying to, position ourselves maybe even more funding that way. So we're trying, so I'm not yet. We're in a different position over there.
So.
And then, other thing I wanted to say was, I think there's one project on the Highway 34 that CDOT maybe just underway with, maybe we can get rid of it, but it's the corridor planning. I know Rich and Gina were working on some corridor planning with what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm checking that out.
So
I think they're scoping that.
they kind of
Did that
put the
meet
ball
your
in with that project. So.
Are we talking about keeping it off? Sorry.
Is the effort that CDOT's going through right now? You guys met with me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good workout effort. Are you suggesting to remove that from?
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need that.
If it's funded already and they found it.
Moving forward.
That's what we've heard. So,
Just one more version of life. Just 34.
Yeah.
So then is the recommendation, because I need something to say to the council. I-25 and 14, so that would be one project that we would say is the, in Harmony Road, I-25 study. And then all of these 34 projects minus the corridor study, because that one's funded. Or a lot of these only got one vote, so do we want to say the ones that got
We'll just offer
votes?
that Johnstown was not there that day, and a lot of them are in Johnstown's vicinity, but.
On 34? Oh, yeah.
I think the ones that we wanted there, okay.
You could just bring that in the, US 31 tier or.
Yeah. I guess the data for me, I think we should go to the data. The votes are the votes, which is not, like, as a technical advisory committee, we should be offering some thoughtful technical analysis of these projects. The political stuff and the voting and the number of votes, they will navigate to that on their own, but I think we should look at the data and say, where are our problems? Number 17 is showing up as a problem, right?
If we showed all of the projects from those two corridors and then just showed the data and ranked them by several different methods, and then you could have it so that you're ranking by safety, or you're ranking by safety and some other criteria, just to have that data presentable to the planning council.
I think that is.
I think we can include all of these projects
Yeah.
for all the corridors. I think just as a baseline, we need to probably bump up the regional priority to say you get the points if it's on I-25 or Highway 34. And have that be a larger amount of points than kind of what was.
Well, and
initially
safety
on.
and asset management.
And then, yeah, you have on the other side, you have points for the safety stuff and asset management and all of those other things. But I think we just need to rework the spreadsheet and then probably have the text for it for the next couple of weeks. We don't have a lot of time.
Thoughts on the prioritizing of those based on the scoring?
Based on this?
On the scoring or the,
Yes.
I haven't looked at this one. Yeah, but, yeah. We can look at this too. I mean, it makes sense to have a double set of data, right? That would make sense too, so.
So any comments on the scoring sheet, please get those to me. I don't know, by the end of the week if you can, and then I can send the revised scoring sheet along with this, what you're seeing on the screen. So, and then have TAC work on that. Does that sound like a plan?
I have a quick question for the group. So historically, Spaghetti Junction was not on the North Front Range list because Upper Front Range decided to make it a priority on their list. However, it is in North Front Range territory. It's on our 10-year plan. We have funding and believe in the out years, slated about 19.1 million currently. It's in bad shape. So it would be my recommendation for you guys to consider adding Spaghetti Junction back to your list.
And that's one that I will just say, having that close proximity to that project, it's a lot of money, right? And the benefit, I guess. Yeah.
Our bridge, we have a bridge engineering staff, and they said, from my understanding, they said it was our top priority in all of Region 4.
Is there bridge funding is there other state bridge funding that's outside of that 200? I mean,
I don't know,
the state's
I
top
think
priority.
it's just BTE, I think it's just BTE money. And they have their own list that they manage, they go and they look at all the condition, all the bridges, and they have all these characteristics that, make up that critical list, and Spaghetti Junction is at the top.
Where is Spaghetti Junction?
It is 85 and 34, that crazy interchange there, we call it.
They call that? That's crazy. I've lived up here almost my whole life. I've never heard that term.
Yes. Yours is no.
Go drive it, and you'll live it.
Well, I already feel weird when I drive around areas and you hear people complain and you're like, I know I sit in meetings and we talk about that, like you don't want to admit that out loud. Because you don't want people yelling at you. Yeah.
And you guys do not have to add it to your list. It's on our list. It's on our 10-year plan. So I don't want any of you to be surprised if funding gets recommended to go towards it.
Do we?
I don't know if that will.
I think we should probably. That's up to you. do we want to go through these 6 criteria and just sit here and allocate some points to each of them? I mean, rather than kind of hashing out through them.
Can you email this out so we can actually see it?
Right now.
Well, if we're gonna go through these, yeah.
Well, that's not what, well, that's a scoring sheet. So
Maybe you
I,
can zoom into this for you, I don't know, Kayla, if you have this for
so I did have points allocated on the scoring sheet that I sent out with the packet last week. So there were points for each criteria, and we talked through the different. So we said safety, I increased it to 30 because that was the recommendation of the group. Mobility is 20, economic vitality is 10, asset is 5. That was the one we took points from. Strategic is 10, regional priority is 10, project readiness is 10, and then I get 5 for discretionary. So is there something else that we want to change?
I think I'd probably advocate for more of that regional priority, getting a higher amount than 10. And then, like I said, just honing it down on the 2 corridors. I think strategic nature and economic vitality, I don't know, maybe we need to combine those 2, I guess.
Yeah, I would. We want to increase, I guess, Becky, I'm going to ask you an annoying question, but I know this is ours and separate from CDOT's process. Do we want to score this as kind of what we're going to submit back to CDOT for our process? And then work on a 10-year plan longer? I know you need to get your 10-year plan done, but.
No, so I don't know, Josie, you'll have to answer this one, how much CDOT's going to take that into account when the meeting is tomorrow.
So that's the only meeting, that's
So we're in the process of coming up with an internal draft recommendation. So we're talking to our resident engineers, our program engineers, our specialty engineers throughout the state, as well as our planning partners to understand what their priorities are. So we're looking to your current tiered list of projects, right? Since you guys are you're in the process of updating it, we have a bunch of new developments coming through. We've heard loud and clear that 34 is the priority corridor. That's not our only priority at CDOT, I can tell you that right now. But it is a priority to us, right? We all see we need to strengthen our east to west connections. So we're going to be aligned in a lot of our recommendations. It's not going to be 100% aligned with your guys' list here.
So tomorrow's meeting, do we take what we have after we get done today and have you take that with you and then keep working on this?
I think it would be good to maybe provide that to council for the May meeting. So Heather can get some just general feedback on Northern Range priorities as she's giving that briefing and that background on the 10-year plan. June is when we will be coming and saying, here's our draft list of projects that we're submitting to headquarters. And it's going to be difficult at that point to make any changes, but it is going to be, if there's something glaringly wrong or that Northern Range disagrees with, that's the time we want to hear that in June. So I do recommend you guys attend and text your council members if something is wrong.
So I guess my thinking is if we're trying to put our best foot forward as a region, we want to try to put projects that will get hopefully in that list and then all the other grant stuff that we do the rest of the year. If some of the projects can be funded through that 10-year plan, it'll put less pressure and there'll be more money for us in the region the rest of the time. So if we thought about it that way and scored this according to kind of some of those criteria that CDOT's looking for, so increase the asset management score, increase the safety score, and lower some of the other economic vitalities and those other pieces that are not going to score very high for CDOT. I think that would be for the region, putting our best foot forward based on the data and prioritizing in that way. And I don't know if that makes sense. I know we don't want to have 2 separate 10-year plan lists, but for this specific exercise, I feel like it'd be good for us to say our priorities are.
I think the TAC coming to council with a list of their top priorities is not a bad idea. I would make, if your sole intent here is to get on our 10-year plan, I would also be providing a narrative of how they meet those PD14 goals. We could honestly do that together easily, right? We all know what these projects are, the goals and the outcomes are gonna be, but having something to just showcase how those are in line with CDOT's priorities, I think is helpful. But you guys, there's other funds outside of the 10-year plan, right? Like we have, you're gonna have to help me. NAPI, we have
Enterprise funding.
enterprise funding. I'm working with my headquarters team right now to come up with some sort of website or something that we can easily direct people to for those opportunities, because there's a lot of them. People are often under the impression that if you're not on the 10-year plan, you're not going to get funded, and that's just not the case. This is one source of funding, our strategic, our highest priority project, but there's several other avenues. So having your own Northern Range priority list of projects is very important outside of CDOT.
Outside of just CDOT roads.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of that's our, what I think what we had said previously when we were walking through this is we want to take the time to put a really good statement plan together, this database that looks at the whole system, that really helps us identify where our problems in the region are. And we had this really near-term deadline that we were scrambling to do something for, so.
And yeah, well, yes, and you hit on it earlier, for grant opportunities, having your project on a list is going to help you be more competitive for grant funding. It just is. So if there's something that you guys really want to chase in the future, I would advocate for that to get on your priority list projects.
So for this iteration,
Sorry,
what is it that we are wanting to recommend to council at their meeting? Just the 34 and 25 projects, and say these are TAC's top priorities for this round. Or no?
That feels like what I'm hearing, but I want to offer if there's anybody that doesn't feel that way.
I think we're agreeing.
What did council, when they kicked it back, what did they say they wanted TAC to do? Did they want a priority? Okay, yeah. They didn't ask for a specific way to do that?
We said, I think it's appropriate for us to use data, not our cards, to prioritize all of these, so that is why we went the data route. So I think it's, as the technical advisory committee, we shouldn't be just saying these are our favorite projects, because they're our favorite, but really, where do we have the biggest problems and what needs fixing? So that's, I think the data helps us give that back to them, so they have some.
I think including the two corridors in a date with data and prioritized gives both the strategic look at the two corridors and then the data for you to then make a potential further decision.
Yeah.
If you're the planning council.
Theoretically, with the data that Josie sent, should that be able to fill out that sheet and actually use the points that were allocated?
But without taking a deeper look at it, I don't know. Just got it.
I don't want to overcomplicate things, Becky, so just give me the look of death if I do here.
I think having a standard set of data where we're pulling from the same place is a reasonable place to start.
Should there be two different tier 1 list of projects? Like,
There always has been, right?
regional.
CDOT has always had theirs.
Well, no, I mean, for Northern Range, you guys are selecting I-65 and 34 as your regional corridors. Could that just, when you break out all those projects, could it just be regional, our top priority corridors? And then could there be actual priority projects that are also, in tier 1 status, but they're not going to get lost in this race between all the 34 and I-25 projects? Because
But that's what I was asking previously too.
Yes,
You guys
but
didn't
next
do that.
next time,
Yes.
I'm sorry, next time we're gonna do that. You guys are gonna do that. I'm just,
No, that's what I was saying too. I think it would be helpful next time. And I appreciate what they said. We've done too much work to try and do that at this point, so.
I was here for that whole part of that conversation, so sorry.
Yeah.
We call it
We've
like
gone
the
around in a few
priority list or something like that, just to kind of coach it with like, hey, we are coming back to this, we're not finished, like, but it's like, this is our CDOT list.
Am I hearing that it is finished? We're wanting this to just be our regional priority list. If we pick 34 in it, or
When are we gonna be revisiting it?
just for the CDOT deadline? Or
For the CDOT
this year?
Can we have a month off?
Yeah.
Of course,
And then
yes.
we can come back to it, please.
I guess we have
There's
other
other things we do need to talk about, but
but we don't wanna like. come
No,
back
no,
in
this is not
5
coming-
years
no,
or
no,
something
no,
like
no.
that, so.
We are looking at your draft list right now as we make our recommendations. So you're just not gonna be surprised with what we do. I want to note Spaghetti Junction because it is in the North Range and it is a priority to CDOT. So that one, I just didn't want you to be surprised with, but it was already on our team.
What is the plan for that? 'Cause I know there have been different.
Figuring it out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they're going through the design or something right now, but I just know that our bridge team is,
Does it need to be?
apparently it's in very, very bad shape.
I know that.
I don't know if you know this, I'm not an engineer though, so like everything, what I do.
Looked at bridge rails in bad shape a decade ago, so.
Right, so Becky, what do you need us to tell you right now to help you for tomorrow night's plan council?
Oh, no, for, tomorrow is the board TBR chair meeting, just knowing what the recommendation from TAC is because the MPO chair will not know this, he doesn't know this right now. But we can make sure, we have a meeting with him at 9:30 tomorrow morning, let him know what the priorities are, so I-25 and 34, and we will we will be bringing them a prioritized list within each of those -25, because there's only 2 of them for December. Bring the 34 projects prioritized. So if you guys want to look at what I sent to you from, that Josie provided along with the scoring criteria, and I can send it to you as an Excel document, that might be helpful as opposed to PDF. And then you guys can score the projects that we can to have. Just those 3 steps.
By the end of business tomorrow, you want feedback from us on the scoring or if there's
Any changes to the scoring, and then I can send out an Excel document so you guys can actually score them.
The data that CDOT provided, I would highly recommend, so that you guys know where it came from and it just, I don't know, I would put on your, however it gets finalized, scores provided by CDOT.
Is there any part of the scoring that is really a variable other than the discretionary category, given that CDOT data is being used?
I tried to make it everything very data-driven except the discretionary.
So really, is that accurate? You really only need our discretionary scores?
I would say that would make, for some of our communities, we have more current crash data and more comprehensive crash data. That if you look at those LOSS.
Is that fair though? Right.
I guess like I was saying.
If you have a problem that is, I would say, I don't want to delay using good data that is going to take 2 years to get through the CDOT process. It just isn't, it takes 2 years to get crash data.
It's an option that we have in our calls for projects.
I would look at those, and if those are comments we have back, it's not the, apples to apples is lovely, but if you have more current data or there's a trend that you're seeing that's going negatively, more people don't need to die because the data's processed slow, right? We should get that on the list and we should be counting that crash data because it's valuable, so. And I think Katrina, she has questions about the data we're using or maybe.
We're not gonna have questions on it, this is completely your guys' score. I just, when it comes to a smaller local agency, you might not have those technical capabilities, it's just another setback for them.
And yeah, absolutely, we don't want people to, I would just say, if you look at the data and there's a huge discrepancy between what's in there, and I haven't looked at it at all yet, so I imagine it's probably similar.
Flag it.
Trends have been going for a long time and they don't have a ton of fluctuation in them, so you'll probably see it, but if there are those things, I think those are feedback you might be looking for, right?
Yeah.
All right, do you feel like you have what you need? Thank you.
Thank you, Marina.
She does,
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah. All right, we made it through. All right, the NOCO Bike Imped Collaborative has an update, and are any more questions or comments on this before we keep moving? NOCO Bike Imped Collaborative, there's a written report in the handout. And regional transit agencies, I don't know if there are any verbal reports online. Okay. And then we'd love to introduce Tanya, our new mobility, you said the title when you started. Mobility director. Mobility, there you go. Tell us about yourself.
Just that I'm happy to be here. I come from a background of public health and working with the community, but working with mobility as a social determinant of health was one of my priority areas, so I'm really excited to join the team.
To have you here. And this is your third week?
Third week.
Third week, so. And then we also have another Tanya, who is the controller, which is a new title, but it's our name. Very good. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And then you have written reports in your packet for the April Planning Council meeting summary, the Mobility Committee updates, legislative updates, and the second quarter tip modifications. And then we'll go ahead and go to the roundtable.
Interesting time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm good. No updates.
I just have a quick one concerning legislative updates. So there is another bill that we'll be tracking that is significant, is not the current updates, but will be for next month, and that is House Bill 251303. Speaking of safety, and this is funding for motor vehicle collision prevention. This would create another enterprise within CDOT, this one being called the Crash Prevention Enterprise. And it will be funded off of insurance policies. And 80% of the funding will be for, let me get the exact wording here, will be for eligible entities, which is all of us, for projects that reduce motor vehicle collisions with vulnerable road users. So that'd be 80% of the funds, and then 20% of the funds will be for funding eligible projects that reduce motor vehicle collisions with wildlife. So that will be years before the funding is available, but if it is passed, that'll be another funding source coming down the line.
So last week I sent TAC out a poll for the Crash Dashboard meeting, which will happen in late May. So just as a reminder, if either you or you want to forward on to anyone in one of your communities would like to have a say in when that meeting is happening, please just respond. I originally said end of business day today, but we've kind of gone over today, so maybe by sometime tomorrow would be great, and I can send out the meeting invite next week, so we have it on our calendar, as well as kind of expectations for what information I need from communities for that meeting. Will also be sent out next week.
The only thing I want to add is that, I don't know if all the communities do that, but we've been having some great conversation with our CDOT counterparts from a planning level. Tim Villabrand and Rosa Valdez, I can say her last name, with regards to development applications and when they come in and when we do our TIS development criteria and how those are submitted to CDOT. And I don't think planning offices and CDOT always talk to one another, and I think it's really important that we're trying to put those conversations at the very start of development applications and getting our developers talking to CDOT. From a regional perspective, like Severance, we have 14, 257, 302. No matter where you go in our community, you're going to end up on one of those roads. And it's super important that we're speaking with them. But in speaking with them, it didn't appear that that's always the case at all development opportunities. So I would just try to encourage us to make sure that we're getting our CDOT counterparts involved in development projects from the very, very start, so that developers don't think, well, I don't have to get an access permit because, well, I'm a mile away from the state highway. That's not necessarily true. The impacts are still there. So I just want to bring that up to this committee, because obviously everything we talk about with developers ultimately impacts everything on this priority list that we're doing. So just a little plug for getting in those,
I'm passing that along, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have nothing. Good. I just have a quick question. Anybody who has the Safe Streets for All grants that didn't have an IGA yet, have you heard anything from, are you?
Crickets.
Okay. Just want to make sure we weren't.
Other than, there in the implementation webinar yesterday, they referenced 2024 awards that don't have their IGA in.
Okay.
As examples of projects that were awarded.
Okay, we got told we were late to submit ours based on our application date. Like, the actual, like, starting to work on it, the draft and stuff like that, it's sent an automated message saying, like, you're late.
But you can't get an idea.
No, you can't even start.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's nice. We are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Sorry for running over.